Hey guys, welcome to another edition of On Social from Telestream. I am your host, Stephen Haywood, and I'm all joined, as always, by my co-host, Mr. Marty McPadden from PodJam.tv. Welcome, sir.
Hello, how you doing, Steven?
I'm doing well. I've been sitting here and I was laughing. Well, we were laughing because during the pre-show, right when we went dark, I was sitting there going, "Atomic batteries, the power, turbines, the speed." From the old the '60s, '50s Batman show, and Marty and I were kind of laughing about that.
And I'm such a geek, I knew right away what it was.
I know, I know.
I used to
Um,
watch that show.
so today we have a jam-packed episode here about show preparation with guests. One of the things that we wanted to kind of go over because a lot of people ask. Um, I know, Marty. You plan for the worst. You hope for the best. You kind of throw your hat into the ring and hope everything goes right. But not all the time does that happen. So in episode 5 here, we said, well, let's talk about this because a lot of people have asked. Now you're a little bit different. I mean, you're a pro, and last week we had Jeff Fitzgerald on, and he's a pro. So, setup time, Marty, is not necessarily something that's like pulling teeth, right? Um,
Mhm.
so let's start from your experience because you do a lot of the production you do is podcasting, and when we can kind of get into
Mhm.
what we do with you to get ready for this. But how long is your setup time with your guests, and what kind of regiment do you go through, to get ready for a show? What's your time framing before the show starts and to when the show is?
Now, are you talking about, my workflow or preparing a guest?
In preparing a guest. So like when you
Right.
make contact with the guest, you say, "Hey," just like for you. So I'll use this as an example. So with you, I said, "Hey, Marty, we're going live at 2 o'clock, 1:30. Let's get you on. Let's make sure your audio video is good. Everything's check. At least we've done and covered all of our bases." And then we start firing up the streams around quarter of, and then we're ready to go right at 2 o'clock. So that way we don't waste our audience time. They come here at 2, it ends at 2:30, and then we can go and upload things. So, what's your workflow with that?
Yeah, I can talk about live. I got a live production I'm working on for next week with a client, a live Facebook. I do, tend to do Facebook Lives with clients. And with those, usually, we pre-schedule those, so we can have them out there. The client likes to share that post. So when you do that, you have to hit it right on time. So say if you have it scheduled for 2 p.m., it starts at 2 p.m. and you have to be ready to go. So Steven was mentioning part of my workflow is especially with a guest. Now, if it's with a host that I worked with before and it's the same setup, we may or may not do a test connection, but always with a guest. And usually the guests are not professional. They may be a first time on live video. And I always schedule something at least a few days in advance. And I kind of position it as a technical test and say, only going to take a couple of minutes. Just want to test your internet connection and make sure you're set. But I do a lot more with that. Normally, I'll test their connection, making sure that they can click on the link I send them, that their video and audio can come in and I can see them, and everything's working. But I also review the quality of their connection, talk about the importance of wired internet versus Wi-Fi, make sure their signal's good, and then I get into preparing them to be on camera. And many times, again, they're not used to it, so they may or may not have done a Skype call, and they have their laptop on the desk and looking down. So I give them all kinds of tips like raising the camera up, getting some books, getting up to eye level, making sure that they're in a well-lit room. I usually try to do the test around the same time as the production would be on that on a different day, so that if they're using natural lighting, the lighting's virtually the same. And basically just getting them comfortable, making sure they're good, making sure they sound good, make sure they have earphones, answer any questions, go through the rundown of the show, and make sure that they're comfortable, make sure they know what to expect. A lot of it is making sure they know what to expect, making sure they're comfortable with their setup, that I can see them, putting them at ease, knowing that they can hear my voice, getting comfortable with me because they'll be hearing my direction. And a lot of it is just making sure everything's working. And then the day of show, I always have them get on it. Usually it's at least 20 minutes before and usually 30 minutes before. and I establish that connection. And even if they have to establish a connection, even if it's just it comes right in, everything's good, they're prepared, and they just leave the connection on, they can do other things, but at least I know that the connection's there, it's
Right.
ready to go. And again, especially with Facebook Live where it starts whether you're ready or not, you better be ready.
Mhm.
And the other thing is when you establish it if you're a producer and you establish a connection early, it gives your hosts and guests the time to chat. And also, sometimes they're meeting for the first time then, depending on their schedules. So at least it gives them some time to chat a little bit, go through the workflow again, the rundown. Because inevitably, it always happens with clients is that they're looking at for the first, no matter what you tell them, they're looking at for the first time. So you build in that pad time, give them a chance to chat. The guest gets comfortable, the host gets comfortable. We know everything's working. And even if you have to sit there for 15 minutes and say nothing, at least you know everything's working. And then what I do is I just keep them honest with time, count them in, and then we're ready to go. So a minute before, I throw up a full screen graphic and just count them in. I do the whole thing. But yeah, I mean, that's really the key is allowing yourself. And the one thing you do not want to do is just don't expect to just hop on, especially if you're doing it for business. Hop on and everything's working. You might get lucky, but both of us, Steven, we both done productions where anything can happen.
Well,
And we
even when we started this
exactly.
show, you had perfect bandwidth. Right after the intro, your bandwidth kinda crumpled for a brief minute, okay? It's out of your control. There's nothing you can do. It just happens,
Yep.
and then it fixes itself, and you're back to normal when you're bringing in guests. I mean, but also, what about we always try to make it so that everybody has like some form of microphone, some form of earbuds, so you don't get that echoing back of the audio from the laptop. It's not so much because we want to play TV. I mean, people don't realize that if you bring a guest on, whether they're on a phone or if they're on a laptop, using built-in speakers with a built-in microphone basically causes an endless loop. So when that person starts talking, and they can hear themselves, it comes back out and then back through the microphone, and it's just disastrous, right? So we
Yeah.
recommend always, always, even if your guest doesn't have a microphone, they're using a built-in microphone when getting them prepared. Put earbuds in. You don't have to wear the big podcasting cans, but put some form of earbuds in, right?
Yeah, I mean, going a little further on that, a lot of people I think get a little confused on that issue. A lot of these services, a lot of these, streaming services, whether it's Facebook Live, YouTube, or any of the other browser-based services, have they're relying on WebRTC, have echo cancellation built in, and people get a false sense of security. Oh, I'm not getting any feedback because it's canceling my echo and taking care of it automatically. It's sort of like an automatic mix minus, but that's really not the case. I mean, you may get lucky and you may not have a problem. If you run into any kind of latency issue, that's when the echo can come in and the echo cancellation can have a hard time keeping up with it. I've had situations like that, and I always insist on the guest and the host wearing some type of earbud, or usually just earbuds are fine as long as they don't have the speaker blaring. They Normally, the host, if they're doing a regular show, I can get them to use a mic, and I have recommended mics and setups,
Right.
and we do a setup, especially if it's a regular show. The guest is a different story. Many times you're kind of fighting a losing battle unless they're a podcaster already or doing a show already. Sometimes they have a set. I've worked with guests where they do have setups, which is great. That's a bonus. But if they don't, then I just make sure that they're wearing earphones and either they're using their built-in mic, which is fine, and I do the best I can with the audio, or even with earbuds like Apple earbuds, or any earbud inline microphone is usually pretty good. If you're a guest and you're not normally doing it, because it's close to your mouth, it's
Right.
usually gonna be passable.
Mhm.
But yeah, definitely the earphones because you never know if that latency that I've had issues where the signal goes up and down and the echo cancellation and you start getting echo and it just sounds horrible. So you better be prepared than not prepared and don't rely on the technology too much.
And Luke Dancy over on the Facebook chat brings up a fantastic question. He says, "Any tips for people bringing in a guest when the signal drops out for that guest? Do you pull the plug and rerun the plow through the show, or I always wondered what a plan B would look like." Um, he said he had to push through this yesterday, so that's a really good question, Luke. I know a lot of different services, like, I know with Wirecast, a lot of times what we do is, we'll take a screenshot. I mean, Marty, we've done this in the past where we get the guest smiling, especially if we see that they're
Mhm.
having spotty connection, or maybe when they got good connection, we have them smile and we take a freeze frame of it. And then we use that as a potential shot, in the event that the video would drop out, because people can be okay with the fact and forgiving if you have a static picture there with good audio. But if the person's just all jarbled, all they're focused on is, oh man, his video's dropping out. They're not focused on what he's saying. They're focused on all that jarble. And me personally, we don't always think about that, because I mean your connection's usually rock solid. But that is, a good practice to have. Just take a screenshot of your guest sitting there smiling, and then use that as a shot, um, to pull up if you're doing multicam.
Yeah, I mean, and that kinda goes to the point of prepare we were saying this in pre-show and very true. Prepare for the worst, hope for the best.
Yep.
Hopefully, you don't have to go to it, but in television, when I worked, at ESPN, a lot of the work involved preparation, disaster plans, they call them, and hopefully you never have to go to it, but you're ready to go in case you lose a feed, in case you lose this, what do you do?
Yep.
There's always an if-then type of scenario. 99% of the time, you're fine. We have fiber. It worked out fine. But in case you don't, you have something to go to. And Steven, you bring up a really good point, especially if you're using switching software like Wirecast. You can create a shot and have a still frame, or even have a graphic saying, just a still shot of your guest ahead of time, maybe a headshot,
Yep.
and just throw it up there, just so it's a little bit more professional, and at least people realize, oh, just having trouble with the picture. And also, the other thing is, I would prepare in your rundown in case you do lose the feed. Could you do a show on your own if you did lose the guest? Have like an alternate rundown available, kind of a plan B, and so that at least you could cover some topics, and don't let it all go, because live is live. Live, anything can happen, even at the network level.
Yep.
And we would have alternate programming we go to. We can run a commercial, whatever you did, but you'd always have a plan B,
Well, like we did
and
last
and then
week.
and then you rehearse it. Yes.
Like we did
Yep.
last week. You didn't know if you were going to make it. But here's the thing. And Marty will tell you, again, going along with preparing for your guest. What we do is we have show notes that, yes, traditional paper. I have the traditional paper in front of me, with the topic headlines. I email those to Marty a week in advance, only because he can start thinking about my situation, meaning his, with these topics. Like, oh yeah, I ran into this or I ran into that. Um, giving your guest a heads up on what you're planning to talk about, or interview questions if you're interviewing somebody. Don't drop it on them like the day of the interview or an hour before, because what's going to happen is you're going to go into it and you're going to be tense. It's like the tension's going to be so thick you can cut it with a knife, because they're going to be unsure. They're not used to working with you. Now, a pro, he's going to go in there and he's going to knock it out of the park. It doesn't matter if you give it
Mhm.
to him 10 minutes before or 2 minutes before. And I've done what I call shotgun interviews like that, because I've learned how to adapt that. But people that aren't used to being on camera, that aren't used to being interviewed in this type of capacity on, live video on social media, um, in a professional atmosphere, it's always best to give them, anything that you're going to talk about in advance, as much advancement as you can. Like, we have these shows planned out 3-4 weeks in advance of when we're going to go live, and we're taking all the feedback from you guys and staging them in weeks. And Marty, I think that's super helpful for your co-host, your guests, because it really opens up the dialogue, so that it's more free flowing as opposed to just forced.
Yeah, and it comes down to a comfort level, right? And especially if you're working with someone that is not used to being on video. Now, if you're a host and you're doing this on a regular basis, then you're probably already preparing, and a bit like Steven was mentioning, you're probably preparing your show. You should be, at least preparing your shows up front. I mean, Steven sends me the notes well in advance. He'll send me next week's notes probably after we get off with this show. And during the week, I actually have the notes in front of me, and I add bullet points on my end of things I want to talk about each topic. So I make sure I cover it, just so you're prepared. Make sure that you kind of work it out. What do I want to talk about? Same thing with great point about the guest questions. The more you can share with the guests in advance to make sure that they're comfortable, the better the interview is gonna be. They're gonna be, especially if they don't do it a lot, they tend to be nervous. They tend, when you're on live, you tend to be, maybe you lock up, maybe you're like a little stiff, because, oh, you're live. What are you gonna do? You can't edit, but you wanna make them as comfortable as possible so it's a conversation. I know that I do that with my clients, whether it's audio podcast production or video, just get that comfort level going, where I kinda talk, say, it's just think of it as a conversation. Just get them at ease and kinda work on it, and then by the time the show hits, they're ready to go. They're easy, and just kind of guide them through it. Now, if you're doing it self-producing, then you kinda do that with your guests, and you gotta take the lead, but yeah, the more you can share in advance, the better. It's just gonna be for a smoother production, much more comfortable guest experience.
And I'm gonna read this comment here in the chat room that we had from Sunny. Let me see if I can pull this back up. Um, he said we have started cue cards that we can go to when something needs explaining. So that's a good tip out there. And guys, make sure you put in your tips in there. We'll be happy to grab them and read them. Uh, Joe Burke says we use show notes for every PopX Cast show, and it's written several days in advance. Again, these are good tips. Now, one of the things that everybody likes to do, everybody likes to bring on a guest. Everybody wants to do a guest. And when I first started this show with Telestream, 5 episodes ago, I did it by myself. And I hadn't done a show by myself in a long time. I mean, it's probably been 6 or 7 years. I always have a co-host. I always have somebody that's there with me that is help facilitating questions. They're answering things. And I got off that show and I said, I need a co-host. I mean, it's just because there's so much
Hard.
going on. And I don't think what
Yeah.
people realize, they want to get involved with guests. Broadcasting on a professional level, or on any level for that matter, is no different than playing a musical instrument. And I'll explain what I mean by that. When you play a musical instrument, you just don't, like, I play drums. I didn't just one day sit down and have 15 to 20 years experience playing drums. No, I had to practice. I had to learn different beats, different rhythms, different cadences and things like that. It took time. I didn't just sit down and start playing, like Rush. I didn't do that. I had to sit there and learn. And the same thing is true when you're self-producing. As Marty had a great point. Learn how to produce a show by yourself. Learn how to do a show by yourself. Be comfortable with your audience. Be comfortable with how you're doing, especially if you're using switching software like Wirecast. You need to learn that, and you need to practice. And I've spent many, many hours and days sitting here doing shows. My wife must have thought I was crazy because she'd come down and I'd look over, I'd say, "What?" And she'd say, "Well, what are you doing?" I'm like, "I'm pretending that I'm live and I'm doing switching so I can learn how to do this without making it obvious that I'm doing it." And that's I know Marty, you always say I make it look easy, but it's because of practicing. And I'd say that to you because now when you add the element of a guest, and I'm not trying to discourage anybody, when you add the element of a guest, it takes on a whole new form of broadcasting because now not only you're watching that guest's feed as they were pointing out what happens if the guest drops. Um, you're worried about is everything still running? Is this feed running? When you start getting into multiple destinations, did we lose a destination? There's a lot of things that run through your head
Oh
as a
boy.
producer,
There's
right?
a
I mean,
lot.
this
Yep.
there's a lot more, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm amazed. Excuse me. I always tell you, I'm amazed at how you make it look very easy. And one thing I really want to point out, because you won't say, I'll say it. Don't be deceived by Steven making look easy. Now, we have a co-host situation here, and it takes a little pressure off, but he's still switching the show. He's watching multiple doing a lot of stuff, and also concentrating on presenting good content. Yeah, I can tell that's why at the network level, putting on a show like this, there's a whole crew of people. If you're watching, a traditional network, the host is just doing the hosting duties, and talking to the guests. They're not doing anything else. You know, the director is just calling shots. He's not pushing buttons, or she's not pushing buttons. Just that. The producer's concerned with the actual content. The executive producer's watching everybody, the graphics person, just the graphics. So everyone has a job. It's like a football team. And that's why it comes off the way it does. It looks easy. Steven's going way above that. And most people that put on shows, you have to do that. Most people are one-man band, you have to self-produce.
Yeah.
But, practicing, I can't overemphasize how important that is. And also, like, if you're using, like a, software like Wirecast, a switching software, they all have built-in recording features. Do some shows where you're just recording the output. Pretend you're doing a live show, count down, and just start to record, and just go through your rundown, go through your show, and record it, and then watch it back. See how you did. Is there anything you did differently? Anything you would improve? Do it over and over again. It's like, I love the analogy about the musical instruments, Stephen. I think that's right on. It takes practice to learn. So think of you're doing your show as a musical instrument. You're practicing your cadence, practicing, and watch it back and be self-critical of it for the purposes of getting better. And the more you do it, the better you get. And then eventually you go on live. And the beauty about when you're first starting out, nobody's watching in the beginning,
That's
because
right.
you're just starting,
Yep.
So you're gonna make more mistakes then, but who cares? But the key is, as long as you're getting better, as long as you're working it and watch your shows back. But yeah, I would always say, do those dry run rehearsals and record them and watch them back and see how you did, you know?
One of the big things I want to state too, if you are using a program like Wirecast, invest into a controller. I know Wirecast, Telestream have partnered with the folks over at X Keys, and the reason I say that is just like an instrument, you have a physical um, drum in front of you, or guitar or piano. When you learn and you get what's called muscle memory, you can put your hands on it just like a keyboard and start knowing, like, okay, my pinky is going to be shot number one, my ring finger is going to be shot number two, my middle finger is going to be shot number three, my first finger is going to be shot number four, and you can kind of lay that out to where you now just move up and down the rows on the X keys, and you're able to produce. Because what I try to do when I'm switching, I try not to look down at what my fingers are doing while I'm switching, because I want you to think that I have a producer doing this. I want you, to think that, and because I want to focus on my guest. I want to make sure that my guest is comfortable. My guest is going to get nervous if I start flubbing all this stuff up. And Marty, I know when you and I and Mark Rogers did that video summit back in Leipzig, Germany, back in 2016. I have a picture we'll pull up, but
Mhm.
we practiced. You and I, before
Oh,
you even went
man.
over to
I
Germany,
sure
we
did.
practiced for weeks. We even had audio delays, and we were trying to work out. I bought special hardware just to make sure that we could iron all that stuff out. So I'm gonna kind of pull this out here, and you guys can see right there. Marty did the presentation. He was live in Leipzig, Germany, and myself and Mark Rogers and Marty were up on the screen, which I was streaming out to multiple destinations. And Marty, you were able to wire it up there so that the audience could actually talk with you and I and Mark Rogers, ask us questions live from the conference. Even though we're pros in that sense, been doing this for years and years and years. We still had to practice. We still had to make sure that we had all of our ducks in a row, right? That's what they kept saying. They're like, "You guys are pros." Yeah, we didn't feel like pros at that. We were trying to get it all tied together. Um, it doesn't matter your level of expertise. You still have to practice and iron out as many of the details as you possibly can, right?
I mean, especially in that situation, there was so much going on. Not only is it the long distance and you got some latency issues and you have to work out the delays, audio, video. But, again, you're relying on, I didn't know what the connection was until I got over there, and we had kind of rehearsal schedules set up. But we did a lot of pre-work before we left, and we worked out our workflow ahead of time, practiced it, got Mark involved, and we kind of worked it out as far as, okay, how are we going to show this on the screen? What are people going to see? What are they going to hear? All the routing, all that. There's a lot to think about there. But again, that's why I always go with what's called the 90-10 rule, right? 90% of the work is done before you even hit the air. What people see is the last 10%, So the reason why the last 10% looked okay in Germany, and also when we streamed it out live, is because we did the work for the 90%.
That's right.
And I think a lot of people, they just want to get up and rolling and streaming, which is great, but, you gotta keep your expectations, yeah, depending on how well you want your production to flow. is the amount of work you put in ahead of time. But yeah, that took a lot of preparation to go through, and like you were saying with the audio delay and the hardware and just working that out. I mean, you're talking about milliseconds and things like that, and
Yep.
but it all worked out, and people loved it over there, so it was great.
Yeah, now we had some questions coming in, Sunny had asked, are you guys in the same building, or are you in a different studio? Marty is actually in Connecticut, and I'm in Eastern Ohio.
Yep.
Marty's coming in through virtual camera into our conferencing software that we're using. Because I use an audio mixer, unfortunately, I'm not able to use Rendezvous that's built into Wirecast. Uh, for that reason. So we're using another piece of software, which is, sometimes you have to use other software to fit your workflow to give the most professional look that you can. Wirecast has a lot of tools, a lot of great tools, and sometimes when you're when you're wired for something else, you have to use something else. And one of the other things, and we're going to get into it in future episodes, Marty is using a green screen and chroma key within Wirecast. I know a lot of people were blown away at the level of chroma key that you're getting. We're going to show that at a later um,
Yeah.
episode. So if this is new to you guys, I'm actually using a TV. You can see this is another camera view. I have a TV behind me. If you go back and watch episode 1, you're going to see how I accomplish this shot, which is my main shot, and with using a TV, and how to stage it right so you can get a nice look without having to use chroma key, without using green screen, and get a nice blurred video in the background without your camera having to do it. So make sure if you didn't watch episode 1 or 2, go back and watch it, because we give some tips in that. Marty, we're going to have to wrap up here in a little bit, but I know there's a lot of questions of surrounding community building. How do I get people to watch? How do I get people to share videos? How do I get people, to get my message out? How do I get people to like me and watch that? And we had a discussion last night live about building community. So we want to kind of touch on some key points next week on the show. So
Mhm.
you guys make sure you tune in next week for that,
That's a hot
because
topic.
it's a very hot topic, and I think a lot of
Yeah.
people aren't sure how to get started, especially if you're new. I mean, the days of Ustream.tv and Justin.tv, looking for broadcasters because they were few and far between, is over, because there's so many
Yep.
mediums anymore, right? So,
Absolutely.
so
Yeah.
we're definitely going to do that, and like I said, we'll get into some workflows. Marty can show you, over the next couple episodes. We'll get into how he has his setup
Mhm.
for the show as far as the chroma key, because like I said, people
It's
were
not
like
as
blown
and
away.
I'll give you a hint. It's not as complex as you might think.
Well, you know
Um,
what?
so,
people
little keys.
people you gotta learn the basics. You gotta understand
Yep.
how chroma keying works. But I do want to put this out there, guys. If you heard us talk about Wirecast in the show, and Telestream makes this product, you can go over to the website. We have 3 different flavors you can download: Wirecast One, which starts at $249, all the way up to Wirecast Pro. And you can pick the flavor that's going to best work for you. We even have a hardware box that you can check out. If you like the style of show that we're doing and you want to kind of replicate it and you want to be able to bring in guests, Wirecast is an all-in-one solution. So go check it out. I think you guys will like it. Like I said, Marty's using it right now to bring himself into the show. So
Using the
uh,
virtual camera out.
yeah,
Wirecast, so,
yeah, you
yep.
can't beat it. But Marty, thank you so much for joining us. If people want to follow you, they can follow you on Twitter at Marty
Yep,
McPadden.
Marty McPadden. Yep, absolutely, you can find me there. Podjam.tv. I one of the goals I have is I need to really build out our business site. Is right now it's kinda one page, it's kind of a contact page that I have right now. But yeah, follow me on Twitter, Facebook, find me there, Marty McPadden. Any social network, I'm Marty McPadden. So, yeah, absolutely. Connect.
Absolutely, guys, and we appreciate everybody coming out here today. We had a great time. We always have a great time with you guys, and so make sure you keep the comments coming. Even if you tuned in late and you want to add something that you'd like us to cover, please feel free to put it in there. I'm pretty much known as the Tech Buzz all over the internet, so if you want to hit me up on Twitter and direct message me and say, "Hey, I'd really like to see you guys cover this on the show," send me a direct message, email me, um, whatever you need to do, leave a comment here, and like I said, we'll go back and look at it after the show. If we didn't get to your comment, we definitely will be engaging with that over the next day or two. So, again, thank you guys so much for tuning in. We had a blast, as we always do, and we'll see you next week for more of On Social.